The air in the lavish Seoul hotel suite smelled of sterile lilies and impending doom. Chiamaka Nwadike, 18 years old with a heart still echoing the vibrant, percussive rhythms of Lagos, stood like a mannequin draped in hanbok silk as cold as her new reality. Outside, the city pulsed with neon life. Inside, her own pulse was a frantic drum against her ribs. Just 3 weeks ago, she was studying for her university entrance exams, dreaming of studying music composition. Her laughter mingling with the spicy scent of suya from a street vendor. Now she was a bride. Purchased one. Her husband, Min-Jun, stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. His back to her. A silhouette carved from shadow and expensive wool. 40 years old. A name her father had whispered with a mixture of awe and terror. Head of the Kim family's security operations in Seoul. A polite term for a world her father's import-export business had foolishly trespassed upon, accruing a debt so large it could only be settled with flesh and blood. Her flesh. Her blood. The ceremony had been a blur of unfamiliar rituals, her Igbo traditions absent, her mother's weeping a silent phone call from another continent. Min-Jun had been impassive, his bow precise, his eyes, when they briefly met hers, unreadable pools of obsidian. Not cruel. Not lecherous. Me. That emptiness was more terrifying than any villainy she could imagine. In their penthouse, the silence was a physical weight. He finally turned from the window. In the low light, his face was all sharp angles and controlled composure, handsome in a severe, timeless way. He spoke, his Korean translated by a discreet earpiece she wore. Your rooms are through there. They are yours. This, he gestured vaguely to the main living space, is shared. You will have an allowance. Driver. Tutors for language and culture. What you do with your time is your concern. And then he was gone, retiring to what she assumed was his own bedroom, the door closing with a soft, definitive click. Not even an attempt. Not a word about the marriage bed. The humiliation was a hot, sour tide in her throat. She stumbled into the lavish suite meant for her, all cream tones and bleak modernity, and collapsed against the door. The tears came then, silent and furious. She fumbled for her hidden phone, the one connection to her old life. Her cousin, Busy, answered on the first ring, voice thick with sleep and worry. Nwanem. Are you all right? He didn't even look at me, Busy, Chiamaka choked out, sliding down the door to the cold marble floor. He just assigned me a room. Like a guest. A troublesome guest. Maybe he's respectful. Busy offered weakly. Respectful. Chiamaka hissed, the bitterness erupting. No, this is not respect. This is a transaction and he has the product. What kind of man does this? A rich, powerful man who buys a girl from another continent and then ignores her. The anger, born of fear and helplessness, sought a target. It found one in the most primal of insults. He is empty, Busy. A beautifully tailored suit with nothing inside. All this money, this power. It means nothing. She said it in Igbo, the words harsh and satisfying. Final verdict. She didn't know the elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Park, was just outside in the hall, collecting the abandoned teacup from the ceremonial table. Mrs. Park, who had served the Kim family for 40 years. Mrs. Park, who was fluent in 7 languages, having learned Igbo from a previous diplomat's wife she served decades ago. The old woman paused, her wizened face tightening imperceptibly. She continued her task, her steps silent, but her mind was whirring. Loyalty to the Kim household was her creed. And this foreign girl's poisonous words, spoken under this roof on her master's wedding night, could not go unreported. The next morning, as Chiamaka awoke to a silent, sunlit prison, a typed transcript of her whispered conversation, neatly translated into Korean, was placed on Min-Jun's antique mahogany desk. He read it over his morning coffee. His expression didn't change. But the hand holding the porcelain cup steadied to an unnatural stillness. The tiger had heard the insult. And now, the hunt would begin on his terms. Life settled into a pattern of exquisite, soul-crushing boredom. Min-Jun was often absent before dawn, returning long after dark. When they were in the penthouse together, he was a ghost, present in the rustle of a newspaper, the soft tap of keys on a laptop, the faint scent of sandalwood and rain. He provided everything material: a black credit card with no limit, a sleek town car at her disposal, a personal shopper for the high-fashion districts of Gangnam. Chiamaka initially used it as a weapon, buying outrageously expensive, daring outfits, parading them at breakfast. He would glance up, give a slight indifferent nod and say, "The color is vivid," before returning to his Financial Times. Her anger had no echo. It dissipated into the vast, tasteful emptiness of the penthouse. She was drowning in gilded silence. The only person who consistently spoke to her was Mrs. Park. The old woman was a model of polite efficiency, but over time, a grudging rapport formed over afternoon tea. Chiamaka, desperate for any human connection, began to ask about the language. Mrs. Park, seeing past the girl's defiant front to the terrified child beneath, obliged. But her lessons were unconventional. "Books are for grammar. Life is for feeling," Mrs. Park said one afternoon, switching on the large television. She pulled up a popular K-drama, a sweeping romance. Watch, listen, feel their jong. Through the melodramatic plotlines, Chiamaka began to pick up words. Sarung, love. Sulpan, sad. Him, strength. She also saw the subtle codes of Korean society, the hierarchies, the unspoken rules, the deep-seated importance of family face or kibun. It was a mirror to her own Nigerian world in its complexity, yet utterly alien in its expression. "Why do you help me?" Chiamaka asked one day, her Korean halting. Mrs. Park poured more barley tea. "A tree cannot grow in poisoned soil. This house has been silent too long. He has been silent too long." She would say no more about him. One rainy afternoon, exploring a wing of the penthouse she usually avoided, Chiamaka found a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she gasped. It was a music room. A grand Steinway piano sat centered on a plush rug, dust sheets draped over it like shrouds. A cello case stood in a corner. The air was still, frozen in time. With a reverence she hadn't felt in weeks, she approached the piano, lifting the sheet. She sat on the cool bench, her fingers hovering over the ivory keys. Then, as if her soul needed it more than her lungs needed air, she began to play. It wasn't a gentle piece. It was the powerful, sorrowful, defiant chords of Fela Kuti's "Water No Get Enemy," the Nigerian anthem of resilience. The music, so fundamentally her, roared to life in the sterile space, filling every corner with its raw, funky anguish. She poured everything into it, her homesickness, her rage, her fear, her lost dreams. She played with her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face, so lost in the catharsis she didn't hear the study door down the hall open. Min-Jun stood frozen in his doorway, a sheaf of contracts dangling from his fingers. The sound had stopped him dead. He didn't move. He simply listened, his eyes closed, his stern face softening minutely as the unfamiliar yet profoundly emotional music washed over him, seeping into the cracks of his own fortified silence. For the first time, he was truly seeing the girl he had married. Not an asset, force of nature. The piano tutor arrived the following day. Professor Han was a gentle, world-renowned maestro who had taught prodigies and royalty. "Mr. Kim has engaged me for you indefinitely," he said with a warm smile, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. No note from Min-Jun. No discussion. Just an impossibly expensive, perfectly targeted response to the secret self she had revealed. It was the first crack in the ice, and it left Chiamaka profoundly unsettled. Her hatred, so clean and sharp, was now muddied by a confusing sliver of consideration. She began to observe him, not as her jailer, but as a puzzle. His two primary bodyguards, Jae and Miho, were terrifyingly efficient men. But they didn't flinch in his presence out of fear. Their loyalty was absolute, born of respect. She saw Jae with a bandaged hand from some unseen conflict, And Min-Jun not just paying his medical bill, but quietly visiting his family's restaurant, becoming a regular patron. She noticed the single ancient bonsai tree in his study. Every evening without fail, he would spend 10 minutes tending to it, his large, capable hands moving with a tenderness that contradicted everything she thought she knew. The biggest clue came from his discarded schedule tablet, left charging in the shared living area. The password, she discovered one night through a combination of luck and observation, was simple. Scrolling, she saw the business meetings, the flights, the cryptic notations. And then, a recurring weekly entry that stood out for its softness. A grandmother. He had a grandmother he visited late at night, bringing her sweet rice cakes. Her heart hammered with a reckless mix of fear and desperate curiosity. 2 nights later, wrapped in a dark coat, she used her allowance to hail a taxi and followed his black sedan across the city. They left the glittering skyscrapers behind, winding into a district of traditional Hanok houses with curling rooflines. The car stopped. From the shadows of a nearby alley, her breath fogging in the cold air, she watched. Min-Jun emerged, not as the formidable tiger, but as a weary grandson. He carried a small box. An elderly woman with a face like a kind, wrinkled apple opened the door, her smile transforming her. Chiamaka watched, transfixed, as Min-Jun removed his shoes, knelt on the step, and with a basin of warm water, gently washed the old woman's feet, massaging them with a care that was breathtaking in its intimacy. The woman cupped his cheek, saying something that made him bow his head. In that moment he looked young, vulnerable, human. The sob that caught in Chiamaka's throat was too loud. As she turned to flee, a large, immovable figure blocked her path. Jay, the bodyguard, looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "It is not safe for you to be here alone," he said, using the formal term for wife. "The boss wishes to see you." Now, he didn't sound angry. He sounded resigned, as if a delicate operation had just been compromised. He wasn't waiting in a grim office or a threatening backroom. He was in the Hanok's small, frozen garden, sitting on a stone bench under a gnarled pine tree. 2 steaming cups of omija tea sat on a low table. The grandmother was inside, asleep. "Sit," he said, not looking at her. His voice was calm. Chiamaka sat, her legs trembling, bracing for fury, for punishment. He spoke first, his gaze fixed on the brittle branches above. "My grandfather planted this tree. He said a man's character is like a pine. It must bend in the storm but not break. My father broke." He finally looked at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes was more disarming than any threat. He was a soft man in a hard world. His kindness was exploited. By the time I was 25, our family's legacy, the legitimate businesses, the shipyards, the patents, was being eaten alive by vultures. One of them was a man named Director Kim. No relation. A predator. He explained in stark clinical terms how her father's Lagos-based import firm had become a pawn. Director Kim, seeking to launder money and move illicit goods, had entangled him, creating catastrophic debt to force compliance. "Marrying you," Min-Jun stated, "served 3 purposes. It severed Kim's leverage over your father, as the debt transferred to me. It neutralized you as a potential hostage or tool he could use against me in the future. And it sent a message to my world. I secure what is mine, and my reach is long." He took a sip of tea. "You were a strategic asset in a war you did not start. I do not believe in collateral damage. Your freedom, your safety, your education, these are part of the contract I made with myself, if not with you. When Kim is no longer a threat, you will have the means and the freedom to leave. To go to university wherever you wish. To live." The transaction was laid bare. It was ruthless, yet it held a perverse integrity. He hadn't bought a plaything. He had acquired and neutralized a liability, with a stated intent to set it free. He had saved her family from a fate worse than debt slavery. The prison, she realized, had doors he was prepared to unlock. "Why did you bring me here?" she whispered, gesturing to the hammock. Because you went looking for the monster, he said. You should also see the man. The man who has a Halmione to care for. The man who failed to protect his own mother from the stress of his father's failure. That man does not wish to fail again. He stood. The car will take you home. Good night, Chiamaka. He walked back inside to his grandmother, leaving her in the moonlit garden with the shattering understanding that her jailer was also, inexplicably, her protector. And the wall between them was now made of glass, and she could see through to his own haunted world. The days that followed were a delicate dance of mutual re-evaluation. The silence in the penthouse was no longer hostile. It was contemplative, filled with unasked questions and stolen glances. They began to eat dinner together, not every night but often. The conversations were stilted at first, a clumsy ballet of her improving Korean and his patient, formal English. He asked about Lagos, about the market sounds, about the music she played. It has great strength, and pain, he said one evening after hearing her practice a mournful Igbo folk song. She asked about the bonsai. It teaches patience, he said, his eyes on the twisted little tree. And that great beauty requires careful cutting. Sometimes you must hurt something to help it grow into its best form. He looked at her then, and the metaphor hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. She started leaving small, deliberate traces of herself in the shared spaces. A Nigerian novel on the coffee table, a vibrant geli fabric draped over a chair. He never removed them. Once, she came home to find the novel neatly bookmarked with a traditional Korean hanji paper tab. It was a silent conversation. The physical attraction, once buried under layers of hatred and fear, began to simmer, a slow, relentless heat she tried to ignore. It was in the way his sleeves stretched over his forearms when he worked late, the quiet intensity of his focus, the way he would subtly, instinctively position himself between her and any unknown person when they were in public. He noticed her intelligence, the quick wit behind her cautious eyes, the way her whole being came alive when she talked about music or her younger siblings. A fragile truce, built on a foundation of shocking truth, was holding. But it was a truce waiting for a spark to either destroy it or set it aflame. The spark came at the Ilsong Charity Gala. It was Chiamaka's first major public appearance as his wife. Mrs. Park and a team of stylists had worked on her for hours. The result was a stunning fusion gown, ivory Korean silk with a bold, crimson Nigerian ankara pattern at the hem and sleeves. She was a vision of cross-cultural elegance, and when she walked into the ballroom on Min-Jun's arm, a hush fell, followed by a wave of murmured admiration and not-so-subtle curiosity. Min-Jun was impeccable in a black tuxedo, his hand a steady, warm pressure under hers. For the first time, Chiamaka didn't feel like a displayed object. She felt like a partner. They moved through the crowd, him introducing her with a simple, "This is my wife, Chiamaka," his tone leaving no room for further inquiry. Then Director Kim found them. He was all smarmy smiles and sharp eyes, a glass of champagne in his hand. "A beautiful acquisition, Min-Jun SSI," he said, his tone dripping with faux camaraderie. "Such exotic vibrancy. It must be comforting at your age, to have such a lively decoration. It distracts from the rumors, no?" He leaned closer to Chiamaka, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey. "Poor child. Married to a statue. Everyone in Seoul whispers. The great tiger has claws but no passion. He needs a wife for show. For Kibin. Nothing more. You are a living mask." The old, poisonous insult, delivered by the enemy himself. Chiamaka's blood ran cold then hot. Before she could spit a retort, Min-Jun was there. His movement was so fluid it was almost invisible. He didn't raise his voice. He stepped into Kim's space, and in a tone so low and cold it seemed to drop the temperature around them, he recited a string of data. A bank account number in the Caymans, a date, the name of a Mistress Kim kept in Busan, the specifics of a diverted shipment. "The next number I recite," Min-Jun finished, his lips barely moving, "will be to the Financial Investigation Unit. Your mask is glass, Director Kim. And I am holding a stone. Kim paled, his smirk dissolving into terror. He stammered an apology and melted into the crowd. In the limousine home, Chiamaka was vibrating with a cocktail of adrenaline, fury, and a strange protective pride. Why? She burst out, her Korean fractured by emotion. Why do you let them say those things? Why don't you prove them wrong? To everyone. Min-Jun looked at her, and for the first time she saw the raw, unguarded emotion in his eyes. A deep, centuries-old weariness and a flicker of pain. You said it first, he said quietly, the words landing like a physical blow. In this very car on our wedding night. Mrs. Park heard you. Chiamaka's world stopped. The blood drained from her face. He had known. All this time. Every defiant glare, every spent credit card, every tear. He had known the source. The car arrived at the penthouse. He didn't move. You want proof, Chiamaka. Proof that I am not the hollow man you named me. Proof that my restraint is not weakness, but a choice. She could only nod, her throat sealed shut. Then tonight, he said, opening his door. His gaze holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. He didn't take her to a bedroom. He led her, his hand firm but not harsh on her elbow, to his study. The room of wood, leather, and quiet power. He went not to the liquor cabinet, but to a wall panel, pressing a hidden latch. A compartment slid open, revealing not weapons but files. Proof, he said, his voice rough with a suppressed emotion, is not just in the body. It is in action, in foresight, in building a future, not just taking a present. He pulled out documents, laying them on the desk under the pool of light from a single lamp. First, a property deed for a thriving bakery in Victoria Island, Lagos. In her mother's name. So she is independent. So she never feels the hunger of uncertainty again. Second, a letter of acceptance to Seoul National University's prestigious music composition program. For the upcoming semester. Full scholarship, arranged through an anonymous donor. So your dreams are not casualties of my war. Third, the final legal dissolution of all her father's remaining debts, with a clause forbidding any future claims. So your past is truly cleared. Fourth, a passport. A Nigerian diplomatic passport, granting her protections. So you are never trapped. You can leave Korea anytime. This is your freedom, Chiamaka. I bought it for you the day I bought your father's debt. He placed his hands on the desk, leaning forward, the light carving shadows into his face. This is my manhood. The strength to see a threat and neutralize it. The strength to see a life upended and plot a new, better course for it. The strength to want something. His eyes flicked to her lips, then back to hers. And to wait until it is not just taken but given. Chiamaka was utterly shattered. Every assumption, every bitter word, every tear of self-pity now seemed like a grotesque parody of the truth. This man, this stranger, this husband, had been fighting for her in shadows she never knew existed. He had been building her a foundation while she was trying to burn down the walls. The emotional dam inside her, built of fear and pride, burst. She didn't throw herself at him. She took a step forward, her eyes swimming, her voice a broken whisper. You are not weak, she said, the words a sacred confession. You are the strongest man I have ever known. And I have been a blind fool. That admission, raw and true, was the final key. The last barrier dissolved. He closed the distance between them, and his kiss was nothing she could have imagined. It was not the kiss of a timid or weak man. It was the kiss of a tiger, consuming, possessive, yet laced with a devastating reverence. It was a claiming that felt like a liberation, a surrender that felt like a victory. He proved her wrong in every conceivable way. His touch was not clumsy or entitled. It was expertly attentive, learning her responses, worshipping her form. His passion, so long contained, was a tsunami of focused intent, sweeping away every last doubt, every insult, every shred of the past. Her whispered words were drowned, not in violence, but in a sea of sensation so profound it felt like being remade. When the first gray light of dawn filtered through the study windows, Chiamaka was wrapped in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady, powerful beat of his heart. She was no longer a prisoner, a pawn, or a purchased bride. She was his wife. And with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, she knew she had fallen irrevocably in love with the silent tiger. Love in their world was not a sanctuary. It was a newly exposed flank. Their connection, once hidden, now radiated between them. A glance across a room, the brush of a hand, the softness in Min-Jun's previously impenetrable eyes when he looked at her. Director Kim, licking his wounds, saw it. He saw Min-Jun's strength had become his vulnerability. A wife he cared for was a weapon to be used. Chiamaka, embracing her new life, had enrolled in an intensive Korean language class at a private academy. She was leaving, her mind buzzing with new grammar, when a black van without plates screeched to the curb. Two masked men erupted, grabbing her arms, a cloth soaked in chemicals clamping over her mouth. Her world tunneled into panicked darkness. But Min-Jun's protection was omnipresent. Jay, in a nondescript car across the street, saw it happen. A silent alarm was triggered. As the van sped away, a sophisticated tracking program activated on Chiamaka's phone, which had been knocked into her bag but remained on. In his office, Min-Jun watched a blinking dot move across a city map on his screen. He listened, his face a terrifying mask of calm, to the live audio feed. The grunts of the men, the rumble of the engine, Chiamaka's muffled struggles. Then she screamed, not in English, but in the Korean phrase Mrs. Park had drilled into her for emergencies. It was a code message, a proof of life and a declaration of faith. Min-Jun moved. The chase was not a chaotic Hollywood spectacle. It was a calculated, converging pincer movement. Jay and Miho in separate vehicles, coordinating via encrypted channel, herding the van toward a predetermined, isolated underpass. Min-Jun's own car, a modified black sedan, intercepted with a precise, brutal sideswipe that disabled the van without causing a catastrophic rollover. What followed was not a fight. It was an execution of wrath. Min-Jun moved with a lethal grace that was frightening to behold. He wasn't brawling. He was dismantling. A precise strike to a throat, a shattering knee, a dislocated shoulder, each movement efficient, final. He fought not like a gangster, but like a warrior who had honed his body into a weapon for this exact moment, protecting what was his. When he ripped open the van's back doors, his knuckles were bloody, his breathing controlled. He found Chiamaka, bound and terrified but conscious, her eyes wide. He cut her bonds with a small knife, his hands trembling now, not from exertion but from released terror. Pulling her into his arms, he held her fiercely, his face buried in her hair. "No one," he murmured, his voice a guttural promise against her skin. "No one touches what is mine. I will burn his world to ashes." As the police sirens finally wailed in the distance, called by an anonymous tip, Chiamaka clung to him, hearing not just the man but the tiger. And she knew the quiet war was over. The real one had just begun. The failed kidnapping was an act of war, and Min-Jun's retaliation was swift, total, and devastatingly intelligent. He didn't hide Chiamaka away. He integrated her. "To protect you, you must understand the chessboard," he told her, bringing her into his strategy room, a high-tech chamber beneath the penthouse. She saw the true scope of his empire. The legitimate shipping lines, the tech investments, the philanthropic foundations for workers' families, the intricate network of alliances and debts of honor. This wasn't a cartoonish mob. It was a parallel economy with its own ruthless code. She met his inner circle, stern-faced accountants, sharp-eyed lawyers, the loyal soldiers like Jay and Miho. They bowed to her, a deep bow of respect, not for her title as wife, but for the fire they saw in her eyes, for the way she had stood unbroken after the kidnapping. She had earned a place at the table. Together they planned Kim's end. Min-Jun laid out the financial and tactical strengths. Chiamaka, with her outsider's perspective and growing cultural fluency, saw the flaw. Kim was finalizing a major deal with a Nigerian energy consortium, leveraging his African connections. Chiamaka, reviewing the cultural notes in the dossier, spotted a fatal error. "He's offering a gift of a clock wrapped in white paper," she said, frowning. "In Korean business, a nice watch is fine. In Nigeria, giving a clock, especially to older consortium members, is like wishing for their death. And white, in many cultures, is for funerals, not deals. It's not just a faux pas. It's a profound insult. He's either being arrogantly ignorant, or his cultural consultant is sabotaging him." Min-Jun's eyes gleamed. That was the wedge. Using her insight, he orchestrated a complex maneuver. He had a trusted associate in Lagos accidentally reveal Kim's insulting gift choice to the consortium head, while simultaneously exposing Kim's financial backer as being under international sanctions. The deal collapsed spectacularly. Kim's credibility shattered. Min-Jun then called in every outstanding debt, pressured banks to recall loans, and within 72 hours, Director Kim's empire was a house of cards in a hurricane. It was a takedown that was both brutally financial and exquisitely cultural. Chiamaka wasn't just his muse. She was his strategist. Their victory was celebrated in private. In his study, he presented her not with jewelry, but with an ancient Korean made-up, an intricate love knot made of a single, continuous crimson thread. "My mother's," he said, tying it gently around her wrist. "It means an unbreakable connection. Tied fate. My heart is now tied to yours, Chiamaka. Not by contract, by choice." That night, their passion was a celebration of partnership, of mutual victory, of a love forged in fire. But as they slept, entwined, a single unmarked black envelope was slipped under the penthouse's main door. It bore the wax seal of a coiled, two-headed dragon. The envelope sat on the entry table for a full day before Min-Jun addressed it. He carried it to his study, Chiamaka following, a knot of dread in her stomach. He used a slender jade letter opener to break the strange seal. The paper inside was thick, handmade. The message was brief, written in elegant, archaic Hanja characters. Min-Jun translated it silently, his face growing stonier with each character. "What does it say?" Chiamaka finally asked, unable to bear the silence. "It is an invitation to a gathering of the Jeonju Guild. Tea ceremony. In 3 days' time." His voice was flat. "What is the Jeonju Guild?" "They are the keepers of the old ledger," he said, leaning back in his chair, looking suddenly weary. "Not a business rival. They are a council of elders from the oldest families involved in our world. They enforce tradition, settle disputes between factions, and maintain a certain purity of lineage. They see themselves as guardians of a legacy. Our marriage, and the very public humiliating way we dismantled Kim, a Korean using foreign insight, has drawn their disapproval. This invitation is not an honor. It is a summons to explain yourself. To be judged." Chiamaka felt a chill. Judged for what? For helping you. For being foreign. For disrupting the order, he said, meeting her eyes. For making me vulnerable in their eyes. Love is a liability in their calculus. They will test you. They will try to humiliate you. Their goal will be to show me that you are a weakness, to pressure me into setting you aside to maintain my standing and the kibun of my household. She walked to the window, looking out at the city they had just begun to conquer together. "And if we don't go, then they will declare us in contempt. Their influence is subtle but immense. They could make your life here impossible. They could block the university admission, freeze assets, turn society against you with whispers. It is a war fought with etiquette and ancient rules, not bullets." She turned to face him, her chin lifted. "Then we go. And we face them. Together." A faint, proud smile touched his lips. "You would walk into a den of dragons for me? I would walk into hell for you," she said, the truth of it resonating in her voice. "But I won't walk in blind. You have 3 days to teach me everything I need to know to survive a tea ceremony with dragons. The next 3 days were a crash course in a different kind of warfare. Min-Jun became her relentless tutor. They moved from the strategy room to the formal dining room, where Mrs. Park oversaw a rigorous education in Korean high society. Chiamaka learned the precise angle of a bow when greeting an elder of the guild, deeper than normal, held for 3 full breaths. She learned the order in which to pour tea, never for herself first, the exact placement of the spoon and cup, the way to receive a cup with both hands, the right wrist supported by the left. She learned the archaic forms of address, the honorifics that had not been used in common speech for a century. It is not just about doing it right, Min-Jun explained during a late-night session. It is about doing it with a grace that shows this is your natural state. They will look for hesitation, for uncertainty. Your confidence is your armor. But I am uncertain, she confessed, her head spinning from the rules. I will never be Korean. You do not need to be, he said, taking her hands. You need to be Chiamaka Kim, who respects their traditions enough to learn them, but whose worth is not defined by them. Remember, you defeated Kim with your difference. Do not hide it entirely. Let them see your strength within their framework. The night before the ceremony, he gave her a final gift. A hanbok of the deepest, most exquisite blue, the color of the night sky before dawn. It was traditional, but the embroidery along the cuffs and collar was not the usual florals. It was a subtle, geometric pattern inspired by Nigerian Adinkra symbols. For wisdom, he said, pointing to one. For resilience, pointing to another. Wear our union, Chiamaka. Let them see it is not a flaw, but a new design. As she tried it on, she felt a surge of power. She was not going as a supplicant. She was going as a queen, armoring herself in the best of both her worlds. The gathering was held in a secluded, centuries-old hanok in the hills of Bukshan. The air was thick with the scent of pine and old money. As they entered the silent, beautifully austere main room, a dozen pairs of aged, critical eyes turned to them. The elders, men and women dressed in somber, traditional clothes, sat on cushions in a precise semicircle. Not a word was spoken. Min-Jun led her to the center of the room. Together they executed a perfect, synchronized bow. It was met with silence. An elderly woman with a face like carved ivory gestured for them to sit on the cushions provided. The tea ceremony began, performed by a master with agonizing slowness. Every movement was a test. When the first cup was offered to Min-Jun, he received it correctly. When the second was offered to Chiamaka, she felt the weight of the room's gaze. She took a steadying breath, recalled every lesson, and accepted the cup with both hands, her left supporting her right wrist, her bow of thanks just deep enough. She took a silent sip, her movements fluid, her expression serene. The elder woman spoke for the first time, her voice like dry leaves. The foreign flower learns to drink our tea. But can she understand the soil from which it grows? Chiamaka placed her cup down carefully before responding in her carefully practiced, formal Korean. Respected elder, the flower brings its own beauty, but it must honor the soil that sustains it. I am learning the nature of this soil with great respect. A murmur went through the room. Her answer was correct, diplomatic. An old man with sharp eyes spoke next. Kim Min-Jun. Your father was a man of great passion, which became his weakness. You have been a man of great control. And now you bring passion back into your house. History repeats. A cycle of weakness. Min-Jun's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Chiamaka did. With respect, she said, her voice clear. History does not repeat. Echoes. My husband learned from the past. His control is not the absence of passion, but its mastery. What you call passion I call partnership. A controlled fire gives warmth and light. A wildfire only destroys. Director Kim was a wildfire. My husband put him out. The room went utterly still. No one had ever spoken so plainly, so defiantly in this room. The elder woman's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something else. Not approval but intrigue. You speak of partnership, the woman said. But a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You are an unknown element. A vulnerability. Chiamaka felt Min-Jun tense beside her, ready to shield her. She gently placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. This was her battle. A chain, elder, is rigid. It can be broken, Chiamaka said. What we are building is not a chain but a weave. Like this. She lifted the sleeve of her hanbok, revealing the adinkra embroidery. Different threads, strong on their own, woven together create something far stronger and more beautiful than a single strand ever could. I am not a weak link. I am a new thread, and I am strengthening the weave. The silence that followed was profound. The elders exchanged unreadable glances. Finally, the elder woman gave the faintest nod. The tea is finished. You may leave. They bowed and exited, the weight of the silent judgment hanging in the air until they reached the car. As the door closed, Min-Jun let out a long breath. He looked at her, his eyes blazing with awe and pride. You were magnificent. A lioness indeed. But did we win? She asked, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. We survived the first encounter, he said. In their world that is a victory. But the war is not over. They will now deliberate. Their decision will come. A week passed in tense quiet. No word came from the guild. Life resumed a semblance of normalcy, but the shadow of their judgment loomed. Chiamaka threw herself into her university preparations and her piano. Min-Jun was often in his study, conducting business, but the ease between them had deepened into something unshakable. It was during this calm that Min-Jun shared a deeper piece of his past. They were in the music room. She was playing a gentle, original composition blending a Nigerian melody with Korean harmonic structures. He listened, then spoke softly. My mother loved music, he said. She played the Georgium. After my father's failure, after the vultures circled, she stopped. The silence in her was the worst sound I have ever known. She died not long after, of no illness the doctors could name. I think her spirit just broke. I vowed never to let anything break me, or anyone under my protection in that way. He looked at her, his vulnerability stark. When you played that first day, so full of pain but also fight. It was the first time this house had heard a sound like that since her. You didn't break. You played. Chiamaka understood then the true depth of the gift he had given her with the piano tutor. It was an act of faith, a rebellion against the silence that had killed his mother. She went to him, kneeling beside his chair and taking his hand. I will always fight, she promised. And I will always play. This tender moment was shattered by the urgent buzz of Min-Jun's private phone. He answered, his face hardening. He listened, then stood abruptly. They've made a move. Not against us. Against your family. The guild's move was diabolical. Using their far-reaching influence, they had anonymously tipped off Nigerian immigration authorities that Chiamaka's younger brother, Emeka, who was applying for a student visa to study in Canada, was a flight risk due to his sister's questionable associations in Korea. His application was frozen, his future jeopardized. Simultaneously, a whisper campaign had begun in the Lagos business community, suggesting the Nwadike family's sudden good fortune was tied to illicit activities, causing her father's new business partners to grow cold. It was a masterstroke. An attack they couldn't fight with lawyers or bodyguards, aimed at the heart of Chiamaka's happiness and her family's hard-won peace. Chiamaka was frantic. I have to go home. I have to fix this. You walking into that chaos is exactly what they want, Min-Jun said, his mind already racing. It would pull you away, isolate you and prove you are a distraction. We fight this from here. But how? By being better at their game than they are, he said, a ruthless light in his eyes. They use whispers and reputation. We will use a spotlight and truth. His plan was audacious. He contacted a major, respectable Korean broadcasting network. He offered them an exclusive, a profile on a new philanthropic initiative, a cross-cultural music foundation to fund exchanges between Korean and Nigerian musicians. The visionary founders. Kim Min-Jun and his wife, Chiamaka, a gifted composer. He would fund it lavishly. The story would be about legacy, unity, and positive influence. The network, sensing a feel-good story with glamour, agreed. The interview was set for 2 days later. The guild, who worked in shadows, would be powerless against the glare of positive public attention. To fix the issue with Chiamaka, Min-Jun used a different kind of influence, calling in a legitimate favor from a Korean diplomat with strong ties to Ottawa, who could vouch for the family's integrity. The day of the television interview dawned. Chiamaka was a bundle of nerves, but Min-Jun was calm. "Just be yourself," he told her. "The woman who dazzled a room full of dragons. Show Korea the woman I see." They sat together on a sleek studio set. The interviewer, a famous and respected journalist, began with gentle questions about the foundation. Min-Jun spoke eloquently about the power of music to bridge cultures. Then the interviewer turned to Chiamaka. "Mrs. Kim, your story is quite extraordinary. A Nigerian bride in Seoul. There must be many challenges. What gives you the strength?" Chiamaka smiled, looking not at the interviewer, but at Min-Jun for a brief, heartfelt moment. "My husband gives me strength," she said, her Korean fluent and warm. "But my strength comes from knowing that our differences are not a wall, but a door. In Nigeria we have a saying. A person who is not hungry will say that a yam that is still in the ground is rotten. People may see something unfamiliar and judge it without understanding. Our foundation is about creating that understanding, one note at a time." The interviewer was charmed. "And the rumors? The talk of your unconventional marriage?" Min-Jun took her hand. "The only truth that matters is the one we live. I am a better man because of my wife. She is my partner in every sense. That is the only statement our life requires." The interview was a triumph. It aired that evening, painting them as a modern, powerful, and philanthropic couple. The positive press was immediate and overwhelming. The guild's shadowy whispers were drowned out by a chorus of public admiration. The next morning the black envelope arrived again. This time, Min-Jun opened it in front of Chiamaka. The message was only one line in the same archaic script. "The weave holds. The matter is closed." They had won. Not by conforming, but by redefining the rules so publicly that the old guards could no longer touch them. Min-Jun pulled Chiamaka into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go. "It is finished," he whispered. "Our life is truly our own now." But as they celebrated, a news alert flashed on Min-Jun's phone. It was a financial bulletin. Director Kim, awaiting trial, had been found dead in his cell. An apparent suicide. Yet the report noted a strange, small symbol drawn in ink on the palm of his hand. A crude, two-headed dragon. Min-Jun's celebration died. He showed Chiamaka the image. "The guild closed the matter," he said quietly. "This is how they close matters. Reminder. They have accepted us, but they are always watching. Our freedom is real, but it exists within a gilded world they still oversee." Chiamaka looked from the sinister symbol to her husband's concerned face, then to the love knot on her wrist. She felt no fear, only a steely resolve. "Let them watch," she said. "Let them see what a tiger and a lioness build together. Let them see our children play in a world we made safer. Their age is ending. Ours is just beginning." The story closes not with a perfect fairy tale, but with a hard-won victory and a vigilant peace. They have proven their strength, defended their love, and carved out a space for their future. But in the shadows the dragons sleep, and the Kim household knows that in their world, peace is not a permanent state, but a careful daily creation. Did their public victory make your heart soar? But remember, in a world of shadows and dragons, peace is fragile. What new challenge will test the strength of their woven bond? When Chiamaka's past in Lagos calls her back for a family emergency, will the distance and old ghosts threaten what they've built? And who really drew the dragon on Kim's hand? To ensure you never miss a moment of their gripping saga of love, power, and cultural clash, subscribe and hit the notification bell now. The next chapter of their dynasty is about to begin, and you have a front row seat.